Um, okay, sorry. So the question that I want to ask, in fact, you've all touched on it, and I think I want to start with this question since it's clearly relevant. So the question I want to ask you is this: forget spin. I think we need tonight to establish what is the truth about the planning situation and who is ultimately responsible for the overdevelopment that is taking place in the town, and how can this situation be changed? So planning you've all mentioned, and I think that there's been, to my mind, I can't make sense of all the spin that's been going on around us. So I'm going to ask you in turn. I will start with Asif, Benita, and then you, Peter. And if we can be as succinct as possible with our responses, and we'll then start the questioning from there. And I'll check with Marilyn next if there are any questions in the chat. So as I've said, sorry, let's, we need to stop this. Okay, sorry. So Asif, the question is really who's responsible and what can we do to change the situation as far as planning is concerned in Watford?
It's the mayor, it's the council that's responsible. There's no two ways about it. It's the it's the planning authority. And as I'm also the spokesman on the county council of the Labour Party on growth, infrastructure and planning, a little bit behind it. So there's been an utter failure in leadership when it comes to dealing with the planning and the housing crisis that exists. Instead of challenging vigorously, working collaboratively, and ensuring that you have a fair housing policy for Watford, what's been happening is that there's no challenge, no very weak relationship with developers, where the developers end up doing it. So there is, this is one of the key things which I find remarkable, that there is no ownership, there's no leadership given by the present regime at the town hall when it comes to planning. And that's something which I would deal with. So the way to deal with it is that you need to make sure that you have a tough relationship with developers. I was actually speaking with other leaders of councils and how they manage to deal with developers. And there is a different relationship to ensure that the right amount of social housing is built. Watford has a 35% policy of any developments over 10 need to be 35% needs to be social housing. It was less than 10% in the massive development that's going to happen at the range. That's a failure of leadership, utter failure of leadership from the mayor. And that's what I would do. I think it's important as leader, you take responsibility for the things that you are doing well and also that haven't gone well. And that's what I find with the spin machine that comes from the Liberal Democrats in Watford, that they try to blame the Conservatives on the one hand, and then the mayor was talking about, he's giving millions to businesses and all sorts of things like that. Actually, that money came from central government at the same time. So they apportion blame when it's necessary and take advantage. And that's something which I would bring honesty as a mayor. I would bring in ensure that we've got affordable housing. I'd stop any further high-rise developments. And even Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, was reported in the Watford Observer that he wouldn't have buildings more than 20 stories. So even the leader of the Liberal Democrats, was aghast at some of the policies that this council is doing. So that is something which I would certainly do to ensure we have fair policy, challenge, collaboration, and ensuring that we meet Watford's housing needs.
Thank you, Asif. Benita, the same question to you, and to recall, I mean, we're not talking about spin here, we're really talking about who is responsible for this situation and how can the situation be changed.
Thank you, Clive. I mean, it's a good first topic to start on because in my experience, having knocked on doors in Watford, you know, I've been involved in local politics in Watford for 15 years, but in the last few years, this has definitely been the number one topic on the doorstep. Even when I'm at the supermarket or going on a walk in one of those lockdown walks and things, it's something that everyone raises, I must say. And Clive, you asked us to take politics out of this answer, which I'm happy to do so. So in that sense, I can very much agree with everything that Asif just mentioned, because I really do agree with what he said. It's a really important point to make to people. We must own up and fess up, and we must encourage the leadership of our current mayor and our current administration, which we're going into the third decade of Liberal Democrat, possibly of Liberal Democrat rule as such in Watford. You can't blame anyone else, Peter. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true, which is why it's a good way of kind of taking politics out of it. Peter, you mentioned in your earlier comment that you said that the housing target's unfair. It's a shame. It's a shock. It's almost a big omission of you, therefore, to then have passed, drafted, written, accepted a local plan, which doesn't mention that once. And that's your own document. And that's, although I must say, Clive, just being a little bit cheeky and talking about the politics, Peter, Asif and I, we're all involved in the kind of Watford Observer letters pages and talking about this on as politicians do. But when you have a document that your own council has drafted with your name on it, it does sincerely surprise me, Peter, that you haven't mentioned that, or you and your team haven't mentioned it within that. That to me is playing politics in itself, that you didn't do it in your own document when, I must admit that it's true that the Minister for Housing and Local Government, the Secretary of State have said that housing targets are a starting point for negotiation. And negotiate, I would. We've got, as someone, people that would know me know that I don't give up without a fight. And in fact, I've not seen the current administration even try. And that's why it's very disappointing to me, of course, frustrating for a lot of people, because at Ascot Road, we're seeing this tower up. And I think, Clive, you also mentioned how we can change it. Well, I pledge to stop any more high rises like that. That's a pledge that I make. And unfortunately, though, we cannot stop the ones that are already there. But instead of us turning into a mini Manhattan, which is all the way from Clarendon Road, St Albans Road, Watford Junction, and then off to near Watford Met Station, Ascot Road, near the Morrisons, those are happening, unfortunately, but I would never let that happen again.
Thank you, Benita. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Clive. You won't be surprised to hear that I've got a slightly different perspective on this. I know that Benita and Asif and the local Labour and Tories like, to create some sort of unholy alliance on this. But the logic of their position is that rather randomly, the Labour leadership in Reading councils decided to build 24-storey blocks of towers. The Conservative leadership of Woking councils decided to build 39-storey blocks of flats. Across London, across the whole of the region, we're seeing these high rises. And it's all due to presumably the failure of the local leadership, Conservative and Labour, in all of those places. Because anyone needs to just drive a few miles from Watford and you see high rises going up. And so, they both talk about playing politics. What I'd like to do is just admit reality, the reality of the situation. We have Watford's housing target was tripled in 2018 to 800 units. I have had several letters from the Conservative minister telling me off for not building enough. They have taken power away from Watford. We are on, so they rank councils according to how many houses you're delivering. We're on the very bottom rung, being told we've only delivered 48%. And so there is now a presumption in favour of developments in Watford to punish us for not delivering enough. So it is a little bit rich then to hear Benita bemoaning that when it's Conservative ministers that are punishing me for it. The reality is that we have turned down things. If you look at Caledonian House was turned down by the council. It was then won on appeal by the government inspectorate in Bristol, who approved 90% of developments when they come to them. A quarter of all donations to the Conservative Party come from developers. They don't do that out of the goodness of their hearts. So I would really like a little bit of honesty with the electorate, rather than pretending that if you become mayor, suddenly all of this will go away, because it won't until we change the planning system. We actually have a system where people are put in charge rather than developers, where councils have more power, where we have new towns being built rather than endless high rises in places like Watford, where we can insist on the infrastructure and affordable. So I think we should be working cross-party on this. For political reasons, my opponents obviously like to just pretend that it's all, I woke up one morning and decided this was a good idea. That is not the case. And I think in the heart of the hearts, they both know that. And I think probably most of you do too. I have said to the government repeatedly that the target's too high. And when it actually came to our local plan, Asif talks about leadership. So our local plan sets out what we're going to do on planning. What is our policy as a council on planning? We put forward that policy 6 months ago. Labour didn't come up with a single suggestion about how that should be changed. And then when it came to the vote on it, did they vote for it? No. Did they vote against it? No. They abstained. I don't think that's leadership. I think that's abdicating responsibility and then playing politics on it and trying to pretend that there's an easy solution, which we all know in the heart of hearts there isn't. I want to go on fighting for Watford and fighting for fairness in the system, which doesn't exist at the moment.
Thank you very much, Peter. Before I go on, I can see Marilyn, there's some questions in the chat. I see one from Linda.
Yeah, so the one from, well, I'm going to go in order. One of them is going to bring us back to what we just been talking about, but I'm going to go in order. So the first question is from Linda. And again, this is, of course, to all of the candidates. Clive will decide the order of that. Yeah. But it says, on Windrush, how did you support the people that lived here for years and were getting thrown out after bringing up their families here and losing their businesses, their jobs, their incomes, their right to work, their access to medical help? So the question is, how did each of you stand up to defend these people, and what initiatives did you launch to fight this inhumane treatment of our citizens? And are you proud of what you have achieved? And if you want me to repeat that question as we go on, and you've heard the first couple of answers, let me know, but that is our first question. So Clive, I will leave it to you in terms of who will take the first question.
Okay. It is in the chat in any event, so people want to remind themselves in this case. We're going to start in this case with Benita, who is the next one to kick off. So over to you then, Benita, to answer this question.
Thank you, Linda, for the important question. And I know, although we were unfortunately, in the midst of a political battle, even though we are not to on overdevelopment, it's, I'm very happy to talk about this, which is something that's very close to my heart and something that still devastates me, if I may say that. I mentioned to you that my own heritage is from parents who were not born in this country, and therefore it particularly breaks my heart to hear and to have read at the time about those inhumane injustices that happened, and perhaps that any of these situations are horrendous and heartbreaking and unacceptable. You ask about which initiatives I almost was involved in or set up. Well, tackling racism, especially in the government, and if I may say within my party, and across politics, is something that I've always gone to do. I launched an organisation called Modern Britain, which was along these issues, and I'm a founding member of Conservatives Against Racism for Equality. So for as long my entire adult life, I've been involved in these kind of lobby groups and pressure groups, which frankly raise these issues to the powers that be to make sure that the issues are heard, that they're taken seriously, and they're not forgotten. So that's something that I'm very proud of being involved in. I continue to be proud in calling out any of these issues of discrimination, racism, etc., and will continue to do that because that's part of my being.
Okay, thank you, Benita. Peter, it's over to you this time.
Yeah, thank you, Clive. And of course, racism has no place in society. And I think, the Windrush, absolutely awful what happened. In terms of tangible things, so I know that Brick by Brick, I think, don't exist in the current form anymore, but I have had meetings with them in relation to this. And we did, I know, fly the Windrush flag at the town hall a couple of times and have meetings and talk about that. I'm really keen to support everyone in Watford, and Watford is a fantastic place and needs to be somewhere that is welcoming of people from all backgrounds. I know that we've, and it's great that Favour's on the call. She did, great work leading a task group looking at ways that the council could improve and bringing in things like an equality and diversity policy and looking at the ways that we operate to make sure that that is as good as it could be. So I'm very keen to support initiatives. As I say, there has been some work, but I think there could be more that we could do, and very keen to support that.
Thank you. Asif?
Thanks, Clive. I think this is just horrific, that what the Windrush generation went through. And I did things which were the soft things and also the hard things. So the sort of things is that I signed the petitions, I joined, helped with the campaigns, certainly did that, wrote to the MP at the county council, wrote to the chief executive to see what else could be done to support the Windrush families. Offered a group came to me to ask for advice. A lot of my casework is linked to immigration, and as a counsellor, whether it's the visa issues, family issues, post-conviction, things that happen. So writing to the Home Office, speaking to lawyers. So I did work on that. There's a group of us to help give advice to some of the Windrush families. And in essence, I was part of that group. Windrush was an example, Black Lives Matters, the George Floyd killing, the impact of COVID, all these things happened around the same time. And that actually drove me to work with my colleague Favour to speak to the council at Watford and also at the county council to ensure that the equalities policies are in place so that it never happens again. These are things that shouldn't happen. But what I find is that things which are an entitlement, a right for ethnic minorities, whether they're Black or Asian, it seems to be almost done, well, all right, we'll do it as a favour to you. We'll do it as a favour, and that cannot be right. When immigration policies happen, when a generation is by right allowed and should be given citizenship, why is it that we have to struggle and struggle and struggle just to have equality? That can't be right in the 21st century. It can't be right in 2021. We do, and that's something which I will bring as a man. I've done in some of these social injustice issues.
Thank you, Asif. The next question, I have a question that's been sent to me direct, so I better ask this one myself. So you wouldn't have seen this, Marilyn, and I presume the person want me to ask it rather than ask it himself. Okay, so the question is, Watford is a town with a significant minority, many of whom suffer racism, discrimination, and misogyny. In your personal, political, and public role, please demonstrate with example, what did you do to help or challenge racism, discrimination, and misogyny, and what support did you provide to victims? So in this case, I think we are starting with, it's not, in some ways it's connected, but not quite the same as the previous question. But I think in this case, we're going to start with you, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Clive. It's a great question. Your question mentioned misogyny, which was interesting. So we did actually, at the last council that Watford had before we stopped for elections, we had a motion on violence against women and girls. And there is a lot of work that the council's doing to tackle that. So white ribbon accreditation, for example, where we will obviously call out sexism in all of its forms, and there'll be campaigns looking at how we challenge that as well. I do think there's a broader issue about, obviously I work really closely with the police on particular crimes and tackling hate crimes when they emerge, and a zero tolerance approach to them. But just about how I, as a Liberal Democrat politician, make sure that our councillors represent or representative of the town. I remember the last time we had this discussion 4 years ago, I admitted that the Liberal Democrat group wasn't as diverse as I would want it to be, and that has changed over the last 4 years. Two of the people I think on this call are now Liberal Democrat councillors, and we have a more diverse group. I think that's actually really important about tackling the broader issues, that we want a council that looks like the town, and that we, that I listen and have regular conversations with people from all backgrounds to hear about their own life experiences. So I can think of many cases where when people have actually contacted me directly in relation to hate crimes, when of course I've taken those up with the police and the council's community safety team. That I wouldn't want to kind of go into the details of those individual cases in a public forum, but there have been cases where people have come to me with those instances of abuse, and of course I've made sure that they've been fully investigated and action has been taken.
Okay, thanks. Asif, it's over to you again.
It's quite common. I was the only Black and Asian county councillor from 2017 to 2021 in the whole of Hertfordshire. And the amount of casework, people contacted me from across Hertfordshire about issues of race, racism in the workplace, racism, arrests that happened to them, employment issues. It was full of my inbox, and like Peter, I can't divulge some of the work that's been done, but I'm a great advocate and fighter for when it comes to these particular concerns and these issues. I've raised them with directors, managers, police inspectors, highlighted the double policy, the double view. If it's a white man that happens, they get let off. When it's somebody else in a particular area, they get a different response. I've advocated for licensing issues. There's a perception sometimes amongst taxi drivers that they get unfairly treated. So I make sure that the policy and processes are followed fairly. I've scrutinized council policies to see if the tone is right. Often it can't be, so I've edited and responded. And to be fair, council officers have accepted those edits and those tones and things like that. But it just doesn't, it's something which, from my own experience and life experience, I can bring at the county council. I was instrumental in ensuring that the inclusive policy was being adopted by the chief executive there. And that's something I will continue to do so. Sometimes I might miss it. I'm a one person, and I'm glad to see more diversity within the county council and also at Watford. But something just needs to be there, and that's what I would bring as a mayor, that natural ability to see the discrimination that happens and work with communities to eliminate that, and making sure that policies reflect, ensure that processes are fair, and ensure that justice is delivered.
Thank you, Asif. Benita?
Thanks, Clive. And of course, as a brown woman myself, these are issues that are really close to my heart. And frankly, any types of discrimination, be it sexist, racist, misogynistic, are totally unacceptable. And I know that as the Equality and Diversity Officer in my position as board member for the Watford Palace Theatre, how important it is that different ways of challenging these discriminatory views across Watford are really important. I've been proud to be part of a theatre, therefore, that has brought different things to light. My involvement in both the kind of Diwali celebrations, as well as, of course, all the other incredible celebrations that we do across the town are kind of celebrations of this. And we must do more to make sure that people feel represented. Growing up here in Watford, where, as I mentioned, that it was nowhere near as diverse as it is now, it was definitely different and challenging. But now I understand that I think it's 16% BME, though I hate that term BME, but it's 16%, and we'll find out more when the census comes in. But we should just be very proud to make sure that our voices are heard. We have representation in local government and, of course, within our communities. And on top of that, continue doing everything we can to ensure that any instances of discrimination are stamped out. I mentioned earlier that I've made a bit of a name for myself in a sense when it comes to calling out racism within my party. And that's important to do. It's not a party political issue for me. It's about inequality and injustice. So as someone that's got social justice very close to my heart and something I deeply connect with from family instances and obviously personal experience of this, it's something that we must do more to solve.
Okay. Thank you very much, Benita. I'm going to go to this question, Marilyn, which it seems to me there's 7 or 2. But just to say, if people do want to put their hand up, then do put your hand up and we can pick you up. But if you do, just make sure that you're in fact asking a question that is applicable to the candidate as a whole. But there's this question from Marcia. Marilyn, do you want to bring up one?
Yeah, so the next question we have in terms of that went into the chat, this one was from Pearline. So it's kind of taking us back to part of the discussion we've had, but she's asking for further clarification. So she says, is it not the Conservative government who says Watford must build more? And how are they, our candidates, going to stop it?
Let me just add something to that question, though, because I think the reality is that I suppose part of this is that who sets the original target? There's a probably further facet to this, which is that, to my mind, and I know it's an issue that's come up within the association many times, we see almost every little green space that there is in a town is actually being built upon very quickly. So is it the Conservatives who set the target? Is that target realistic, I think? And how can we change that? So I think, Asif, it's you to kick off with this.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to do there's a two-prong to this. One, there's a national issue, national government issue, and that needs a national conversation where councils work together. So we've got the Labour group, the Liberals have their own national group, Conservatives have a national group, there's something called the LGA, which is Local Government Association. We work together collectively to ensure that the planning system, in my opinion, the planning system's broke. I've said this over and over again, that it's not working to solve the housing crisis. And what you need to do is make sure that there are planning, there's areas where you can build and that needs to be built. That's where lobbying comes in, that strong leadership is necessary, working with national politicians across the boards, to achieve the best planning policy. That's number one. Number two is when it comes to Watford per se, so you need to engage in that debate, you need to fight, you need to battle, you need to show that leadership when it comes to those planning targets that the national government has set. It might be the computer says this, but you need to fight it, you need to battle it, you need to ensure that you use planning terms to do so. And that isn't what's been done. I can absolutely show that it hasn't been done. And secondly, by default, you need to have that battle with developers to ensure that they build social housing, affordable housing, and not high rise. Can you imagine a developer actually trying to build when the town's mayor publicly says, I will not accept a development more than X stories? Would the developer in all sense do that? And if that developer doesn't want it, other developers do. So there's a way of exhibiting that leadership, which the Liberal Democrats have failed to do so over the past 20 years.
Thank you, Asif. Benita.
Well, I think we would all agree that we do need more housing across the country. It's important that we have homes that can house both the future population and the current population and allow people to be able to buy affordable homes that they can live in and enjoy their lives within. So, of course, I would say any government would want more houses to be built. But I think, Pearline, you mentioned about the targets. Well, we earlier said we wouldn't get political, but to get political on this, yes, there is a national target by the Conservative government, but the Liberal Democrat target for that is 80,000 more. So everyone agrees that there should be more housing. For me, though, it's not necessarily about the national picture. I care about Watford. It's about Watford. And what is appropriate for me in Watford, and from all the conversations I've had with local people, is not those tall towers, so-called Taylor's Towers. People really, revolt against those the tall towers in the mini Manhattan, so-called, that is in the town centre or also being planned for it. It's not what people want to see in our town. And personally, as someone whose grandparents live in Croydon, so we make that journey quite often, when you drive up to Croydon, you see these towers and it looks like a London suburb. That to me does not reflect what Watford should be like. Watford is a pleasant county market town in Hertfordshire, proudly not in London, and to see it as a London suburb is not appropriate. I think we do need to make sure that there is a voice fighting this, and frankly, not just working with developers, but making it clear to developers that this is not the vision that they want for Watford. Unfortunately, that's not what we've seen in the last 4 years, but that is what I would prove in the next 4 years if I was to be elected.
Thank you. Peter, your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, the vision that we set out in our local plan that's going through the process was for example, more development, more residential in the town centre. It was to limit the high rises. There was one thing actually that Asif said that I agreed with. He said the planning system is broken. I completely agree with that. And what I find obviously quite frustrating is then we have the pretense from the 2 other mayoral candidates that somehow they could just go around and say, oh, we don't agree with high rise, we don't agree with this development. Actually, if I specifically said I was against a development, that would be breaking the law. If I said that, it would just, there's a quasi-judicial process. It's a legal process when planning applications are made. So some of the things that, Benita and Asif are saying they would do aren't actually allowed legally. When it comes to lobbying, I mean, I've lobbied a lot. What I think would be quite helpful is if our local MP started off by just saying the target's wrong, the target's too high for a place like Watford. I mean, Benita mentioned national Lib Dem policy about having a higher target. It's about where you build the houses. So the Liberal Democrats believe we should build 10 new towns. After the Second World War, we built places like Stevenage, Milton Keynes. They had the schools, they had the parks, the infrastructure. I think we should be building some new towns like that. The problem at the moment is that what we're saying is all the development's got to be in places like Reading, like Woking, like Watford. And so you end up with these high rises because I'm not prepared to build on, Garston Park or Castlebury Park. And so there isn't that much land left. I've also been fighting a lot for decent homes. I mean, some of you might remember a few years ago, there was a proposal to build 14 properties at Wellstone, 7 of which had no window at all. They didn't have a safe fire escape. They were tiny. They didn't meet the government's own minimum standards. And the council didn't even get to decide whether or not that had planning permission at Wellstones. And I kicked up a huge stink about that. It was in all of the planning publications. It was actually in a report by Nick Rainsford, the former housing minister. And partly as a result of that, Dorothy raised it in the House of Lords, Sal Brinton raised it in the House of Lords. We kicked up a massive stink. And now, I mean, it's bizarre that it's come to it, but the government have said all properties must have windows. They must meet minimum standards. And the cause celeb, the example they kept using was the Watford example. So I've made lots of noise about this. What I think would be quite helpful, as I say, is if Watford's MP backed me and said, actually, we need to change the system. And if across party, we all said repeatedly, the planning system is broken and we need to change the planning system so that we can have a good quality of life for everyone in Watford.
Thank you very much, Peter. It may be that if that really is an issue, that we should all be thinking about the strategies that we do use, because certainly I know there's a lot of concerns around the overdevelopment that's taking place in Watford. And but hopefully we're not going to go back to that particular planning question now. But I think, Marilyn, what's the next question?
The next question, I'm going to invite Joe Innes, if you'd like to come to the microphone, because I know you're not shy. I know you've put it in the chat, but it's lovely to hear your voice. And then we're going to go to another voice question, which will be Dawn. But Joe, over to you.
If it's not cheeky, can I skip my first question and just jump to the second, which Andrea's built on? Is that okay?
Okay, go on.
Absolutely.
So some of our members and partner organisations are supporting some extremely desperate people, from providing families with basic necessities like soap and toothpaste, providing shoes to school children. There's a lot of food banks and stuff like that as well. Do you think that these are services that charities should provide, or are those charities having to cover a gap in what the government should provide? And then Andrea kind of added to that as well, which is, to ask a candidate, what are you doing now to support the third sector? And can you list out substantive things that you've done over the last 6 months or, recently, identifying issues within communities and supporting them to make positive change? Okay, so that's a question to start with you, Benita.
Thank you, Joe. Well, as someone who works for a charity myself, that's my day job, that I know that there's an important position for charities and the third sector in society. Of course, that goes hand in hand with both local government and national government, but also other services. And of course, Joe, the situation that you mention is, of course, horrible and intolerable and not acceptable. So it's really horrible to hear about these circumstances where people don't have what they need. And I'm proud that, for example, as a party, we are announcing historic support for those that need the most in society, and I encourage national government to be able to continue doing so. And I know the Chancellor's looking into this more. However, as you mentioned, we're here to talk about Watford, not Westminster, and it's really important that those charities are supported. I know that it's really important that they're getting the funding from local government, that it's fair, that it's not just the people that are kind of in with the council or politically aligned, which is just, in my opinion, not very fair or acceptable either. So it is of utmost importance that charities get the support they need. They do incredible work through volunteers as well as paid staff, and the work that they do it remains something that I'm most proud of as a Watford resident.
Thank you, Benita. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Clive. First of all, I agree with the premise of Joe's question. It's outrageous, really, that we live in a society where charities are having to plug gaps that shouldn't exist in the first place. We shouldn't have a situation where children don't have decent school uniforms or shoes, or food banks, so kind of the amount of use of them is absolutely soaring. And so I think that's completely wrong. And, my background is about supporting community groups and being very much involved in education previously. There's lots that we've done. So we've raised a lot of money with the Watford COVID appeal. I think that's £200,000. It's all gone to local charities. I was told off earlier for mentioning the COVID funds we've had from central government, but it's up to councils to decide to some degree how they administer those. And I'm actually quite proud of the fact that we've given a large proportion, much greater than most councils, to the third sector. That's been administered by W3RT. So we've been making sure that local charities doing great projects. I can see Andrew's joined us, people like Brick by Brick that have been able to put in bids in the past for that funding, and then have really targeted that at people in need. So there's lots that we've done, but as I say, it's a shocking indictment that we're in a situation where we are. Benita said we shouldn't, it's historic support from the government. I would just point out, the Conservatives have increased VAT, which is absolutely awful for people on low incomes and breaks their manifesto commitment. They've increased national insurance, which they said in their manifesto they wouldn't, and it harms both employers and employees. So at the moment, a lot of people on low income are seeing food and fuel prices absolutely soaring. At the same time, they're seeing these tax rises. As a council, we're doing lots to support charities. We're keeping our share of council tax down, and we're also reducing it for people on the lowest incomes. But I'm under no illusions about the scale of the problem, and come across people day and daily who are in terrible situations, and we do our best to support them. But actually, there is a fundamental issue that the government needs to be addressing when it comes to these issues around poverty.
Thanks very much, Peter. Asif?
Thank you. I've been volunteering with charities every week for the past at least 2.5 years. Every week I've been with one charity or another and supporting them. They do a phenomenal amount of work in Watford. And that's one of the key things in one of my manifesto pledges is to introduce a poverty charter. And that poverty charter means that the council will use its powers, its political powers, its financial powers, to ensure to eliminate poverty, with the aim of eliminating child poverty and pensioner poverty. That means working with charities, working with groups, working with council officers. As mayor, I have monthly updates to ensure how we are looking at that, working with the county council, working and also putting policies and the impact that they have on poverty. So, for example, I would not have closed the supervised play areas that were in the Hairbreaks and Harwoods, because the implicit impact of that was that actually increased poverty. That wouldn't have happened. and I would reintroduce those as mayor, because that's supervised play for hard-working families that needed that respite, and it provided other things as well. It may have saved £250,000, but the impact that has in terms of poverty and the impact that has in the social fabric of our town is incalculable. So these are types of policies which this poverty charter will bring in. So with charities, I've been linking them, I've been working with them, I've been working with faith groups, those hard to reach areas, whether it's food banks, with homeless charities, whether it's with pensioner charities. I could name, it's One Vision I've been working with, Small Acts of Kindness, the Hygiene Bank, Save the Day, many other charities, and churches. Gurdwara has been working exceptionally well to deal with this as well as the mosques I've been working with, trying to ensure that all communities have been met. And I'm going to make it's not a party political point. I think all councillors have been working their hardest to deal with this, and it's going to continue. This is going to continue, irrespective of whether you are yellow, red, or blue, irrespective. It's going to continue, and we can't let that social fabric tear here. We've got to deal with it, and that's one of my key priorities as a town. I put it as my #1 priority to town, to just ensure we cannot be the 5th richest country in the world and still have poverty in this country. It's just it does beggars belief, and that's what I will be doing as the mayor.
Thanks very much, Asif. I think, Marilyn, you mentioned that Dawn wanted to ask a question, and I noticed she did have her hand up. Dawn, do you want to put your camera on? And is it a question that you do have?
I won't put my camera on. I think Peter covers me. I wanted to ask the candidate who authorized the non-window flats, but I think Peter already covered that.
I hear you, Marilyn. I think that's going back to plan, and we're not going to be going back to that again. So, Marilyn, do you want to go to the next question that we've got?
Okay, so the next question is from Rhoda. Now, this is, I'm not going to not read the questions because it touches on an issue, but this is a slightly different facet. So it says, are there plans for school building, since as it stands before finishing the building, school places every year are a disaster? And this is not just for the Liberal Democrats only, it's been happening. So what are the plans for, and I guess the way I would summarize this is, what are the plans for building infrastructure to support some of the new buildings that are going up?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, this is an issue about leadership, because actually we do know, let me tell you that actually education and school buildings are a responsibility of the county council. So it's not the mayor's responsibility, but there's an issue then. So the response really has got to be about the leadership that you are going to provide as the mayor in response to that particular question. So we're going to start with you, Peter.
Thanks, Clive. It won't come as a great surprise to many of you as an ex-teacher that I do ask a lot about this when it comes to developments in the town. So there is a new primary school being built, or will be built, near the football ground, and the hospital is part of that development. There's also a new primary school as part of the development on St Albans Road. So there are a number of new primary schools that are in the pipeline. One of the issues is about secondary school provision. Of course, lots of students and pupils in Watford go to secondary schools that might be in Hartsmere or Three Rivers. And I know that the county council are looking at how they can increase provision for secondary locally as well. So as I say, there are at least 2 new schools that are primary schools that are planned in the next few years locally.
Thank you. I think, sorry, that's Asif, I think your response to that question.
I think this is one of the failures of the planning system, the infrastructure. So Watford is the planning authority, but the county council, in this 2-tier system that we've got, it looks after much of the infrastructure that comes along with it. And my experience as a county councillor is that you've got to have those discussions from Hertford, rigorous discussions with developers, rigorous discussions with whether it's the education authority, i.e. there, or the highways authority, which is in Hertford, and to ensure that you get the best deal for Watford. It isn't happening all the time. And that disjointed work is where you come in, and you talked about it, Clive, about that leadership, to understand how the county council works, understand how you can get the most out of developers and those funds are necessary. Absolutely, we need schools. We need to make sure that the schools are fit for purpose. Local authorities end up building them, but then they become, whether they become academies or whether they become other forms of schools, that's a different discussion in itself. I've got a particular view, perhaps an old-fashioned view, where the local authority, I think, it has probably the right view when it comes to building schools. But that leadership, where you connect and be influential in getting the right deal with Watford, is something that I can certainly bring.
Thank you. Benita?
Well, thank you. And of course, the excellent schools that we have in Watford is such a draw to people coming to our area, and it's a source of great pride for people like me who are fully educated through the Watford state system. So it's something that it's amazing that we have in Watford, and we should ensure that this continues so that we have excellent education attainment for all our younger people. And of course, that infrastructure coming alongside development is a key manifesto pledge of mine, as I mentioned earlier, and we do need to ensure that we do have the services for people who come to live here or who move to different areas of it within Watford. It's really important that that goes alongside development, not frankly as a panicked afterthought or as something that happens years later. It needs to happen at the same time so that we don't have any gaps for people. Well, for me, I think we've mentioned that this is obviously education is a Herts County Council issue, but I do believe that if I was to be elected mayor, that as a Conservative, having alignment, political alignment with the Herts County Council would be no bad thing, because I think I don't see people working alongside different levels of government as enough in my opinion, and as well as I think we should. And we need to work alongside, not in spite of, different tiers of government to ensure the best deal for people in Watford.
Thank you, Benita. Marilyn, over to you again. Can I ask you all, though, because we seem to have still quite a few questions that people are coming up, to be as succinct as possible in a response. Marilyn, next question, is that Dwayne?
Yes, so our next question is Dwayne McFarlane says, Benita stated that she would reduce taxes, brackets, which is good to hear. However, wouldn't that also mean a cut in services? Also, how would you improve parking?
Okay, so I think in order to apply this to all candidates, I think the question really is effectively, how are you going to pay for your services, and how is in fact taxation going to be incorporated within that? And parking, which is a wide issue and is an issue across the town, what you are going to do to improve parking. So I think we're going to start in this case with Asif.
So, in the wonderful world of reducing taxes and improving services, one of the fundamental ways of doing that is to make sure that businesses thrive, that we have revenues coming in, and that can help with paying for services. I think what you need here is to be realistic that when we want to have services, the policy of austerity for the past 10 years, and so I think Peter mentioned the cuts to public services has decimated local authorities. So local authorities are what they can do. Councils that they could do. When I first came in as a councillor, it was in the midst of the austerity cuts that were happening. And I think that's so fundamentally important that you keep finances absolutely clear. You commit to things that you can afford, and making sure that you create an environment, an atmosphere where the town flourishes and businesses flourish. As a consequence, you can drive revenues, you can get things done that way. That's one of the key alternatives to higher taxes. In terms of parking, now, I live in a Calalan ward, and I can tell you parking is an ongoing concern here. And we've got to realise that more and more people are getting cars. There's a finite number of spaces. What I would do as mayor is making sure any developments that exist that come into fruition, that you've got sufficient parking spaces. You know, you cannot have 1,200 flats being planned with only 200 car parking spaces. That's going to cause problems, not just in the Calalan ward. I'm talking about the TK Maxx development. That will cause problems in Nascot. That will cause problems in Central, because they're going to find spaces to park. So there's no easy solutions. Making sure that the development is sustainable, making sure that there are developments where sufficient car parking spaces are there, and that's good development that allows. And thirdly, you need to have alternative solutions to cars. That means buses, that means working with the county council again, and making sure that it's the fares are cheaper and they run regularly, that it is an alternative to the car. Because at the moment, people will continue to drive until they get an alternative that they can tolerate to the car.
Thank you very much. Benita.
Thank you. Well, Dwayne, thank you for your question, and also appreciate your specific question about my plans. But just to say that I think it's really important that, given the cost of living crisis, that we do all we can to ensure that Watford residents have as lean a council tax as possible. And that's why I've pledged to cut council tax, because currently we have the second highest council tax in the whole of Hertfordshire. And I think we can do much more to ensure that people have a bit more breathing room when it comes to their personal finances. But how I would do that is not a cut in services. It's actually getting back to basics when it comes to council services. For example, part of the gardening tax that came in under the Liberal Democrats in 2020, it's a shame to me that this kind of regressive stealth tax affects people of lower incomes disproportionately. And this up to £45 surcharge is something that I don't agree with, and I would cut too. But I wouldn't cut services. I would make sure that those vanity projects that I see happening across the town are not used, but are not a waste of taxpayers' money, in my opinion. We've seen things like the Uber bus service or the Arriva Click service, which I don't know if you've ever seen it, but whenever I see it across Watford, it's running empty. It's, so much for carbon efficiency and, essentially making sure the environment is protected, but that's running on our taxpayers' money, and I don't think that's a good service, and it's frankly not used enough. We need to make those calls instead of also, for example, redeveloping things like the Watford Junction forecourt and the bridge to nowhere at the top of the town, which has been a massive spend of our taxpayers' money, which is, continually refurbished, but doesn't really add much difference. And in fact, when it comes to Watford Junction, we've got rid of the taxi rank, the bike racks, and of course the so-called kiss and ride service. So the short-term car park is much more inconvenient, and frankly isn't used as much as it should, because that hasn't been a good use of the money here. So that's my view on that. I'd make sure I deliver value for money and ensure that good financial management is at the core of my council. You asked about parking. Well, there's someone who has a family who run local businesses in Watford. I do think it's really important that we ensure that the local parades, not just the high street, have good parking. I talked earlier about making sure that parking and availability of car parking is important for the development that we're seeing, but also not just assuming that everyone is going to cycle everywhere. That's just not practical. When people need to take their kids to school or run to do a big shop or frankly travel more than somewhere that's close by, people need cars. That's just the reality of it. And assuming that people will use either public or public transport or cycling or walk is just not realistic. So we need to end this war on car owners that we've been seeing recently and ensure people actually have the amenities to use the choices that they want, and also have the choice to shop in local parades and not just rely on online shopping and the Amazon or Hermes deliverer to come to your door with it. That's not helping the local business environment thrive. And that's not keeping our local employers flourishing when it comes to local jobs in parades from St Albans Road to Garston Park Parade across the whole of Watford.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Benita. Peter.
Thanks, Clive. I'm not quite sure where to start after that. But I do think that, I mean, in all seriousness, we're going to elect a mayor of the town in 2 weeks' time. And Benita's just said a load of stuff there that is just not true. So first of all, she said that there's a war on the car owners. I think the only war on car owners is by the Conservative-run county council on the condition of the roads with all the potholes in, because one thing puts people off is trying to meander through them. And then she blamed me for the charge for the forecourt outside Watford Junction. That was entirely funded by central government, Conservative run, and the Conservative County Council. They paid for all of that. She's then unhappy about the lack of a drop-off point. I'm so annoyed about the lack of a drop-off point. I actually brought the Hertfordshire leader of the County Council, the Conservative, to Watford Junction to see what the situation say. We need a drop-off point. Watford council officers have designed a drop-off point, which you're blocking and have refused to implement time and time again. And he said, yeah, it is bad, isn't it? I'll go away and come up with a plan for it. And he's refused to do that. So to then hear a Conservative politician bemoaning that when it's the Conservative-run county council that have repeatedly blocked it and who have funded things that apparently she's really unhappy with, just isn't really that credible. I mean, our policy is actually about encouraging more use of bikes and walking, but also public transport. We've done a lot to support that. Parking is, of course, a huge issue, and we have always taken the approach of listening to residents. So if residents want a controlled parking scheme in their area, then they can have it. If they don't, then there isn't. And I think it's important as a council that you put the arguments forward, both pros and cons, and then let local residents make that decision. We charge £25 a year for the first car. That's the lowest anywhere. I've not come across any council actually, certainly in Hertfordshire, that charges such a low amount. But when it comes to council tax, every single year that I've been mayor, we've raised council tax by less than inflation, so not going up with prices. We've had the lowest increases for the last 2 years. For every pound that people on this call pay in council tax, for every pound you pay, 14p comes to Watford Council, 86p goes to Conservative County Council and Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner. They've increased their fees by far more than inflation this year, and I've kept ours way below inflation. One of the reasons we've been able to do that is that we've massively increased the amount of income we generate from commercial property. We've diversified our portfolio. So each year that generates about £12 million compared to 9 million from council tax, which I think is in the interest of all of us to make sure we get good value for money. We can invest in services and keep council tax down. So I think it's just important to have a degree of credibility when it comes to this. To say somehow that you could cut council tax and introduce and remove the charges for garden waste. I mean, Benita said a few times that that's regressive. We actually still subsidise that service. 10% of councils don't collect garden waste from anybody because they say they don't have to, so they choose not to. Previously, we had a situation where some houses, one house in Watford had 7 garden waste bins. They were paying nothing for that service. It was being entirely subsidised, and actually quite often the lowest earners don't have a garden. So I think making residents put a proportion of the cost of that service, and then, as I say, most is still being subsidised when 10% don't charge at all, and of those don't collect at all garden waste. And of those councils that do collect garden waste, 80% charge for it, and we charge less than average. So I think it's important when you come into to have this election that we actually base the debate on reality.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Marilyn, just looking, I think I can see a question here from Marigold that may be the next one that we haven't answered.
No, I've been collecting them in order. Now, just in terms of timing, let me just know, when did you want to have a break? Do you want another question? And
we'll try and see if we can get a couple more questions in, and then have a break. So when I know.
Okay, wonderful. So just going in order in terms of how they were appearing.
Which
in the
question
chat.
is this one?
The next one we had was from Andrea. So one of the questions that was being asked was about the young people. So she says, what are you doing or have you done to support the young African Caribbean adolescents to achieve and attain higher grades? Because she said they're in a disadvantaged group, and when you look around the town centre shops, etc., there are fewer employees from the African Caribbean community.
Okay, so again, I have to say that's a question that relates to the county council's responsibility. So it's about as far as education and attainment is concerned. However, the local council has to play a leadership role in seeking to support that. So the next person, Benita, can you pick this question up?
Absolutely. And as someone who is, of course, a brown person myself and is someone that grew up in using the schools here, it's been my privilege to be able to go into local schools up and down Watford to both use, share mentoring ability, which I do at my old schools, but also to give some political engagement talks, which I've really enjoyed doing to the secondary schools. I think it's really important that people feel that they have see faces that represent themselves in leadership roles in every level of, in every sector and every level of society. So I enjoy doing that. And in fact, going back to my school tomorrow for a Hustings, our next one, Peter and Asif, it doesn't end, does it? So it's lovely for me to be able to go to see local students in their own comfort zones and encourage them to basically see that whatever they would like to do in the world is possible for them. I know when I was elected at the age of 23 as a councillor, I was one of the youngest in the country, and it's important for me, especially when it comes to political engagement, which I would say, of course, in a time like now when I'm campaigning to be Watford Mayor, that people do see that they can make a change and have their voice heard. So it's something I truly enjoy doing and would love to do more of if you know of any opportunity.
Thank you very much, Benita. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. So there's a few things that I would want to highlight. First of all, supporting businesses run by people from all backgrounds. That I've been to many, Watford's got a lot of entrepreneurs in the town, people opening up businesses and giving them all the support that I can give in the role has been really important. Of course, things like Young Enterprise that I've been very supportive of, the entrepreneur, the apprenticeships that we've had as well. We do have now apprenticeships at the council. And also my manifesto gives a commitment to having an incubation and innovation hub in the town hall, which would be somewhere where new businesses can grow, existing businesses can expand and network. So I would be very keen to support our local businesses. Since the height of the pandemic, unemployment in Watford has pretty much halved, and we have got a very active economic team who are doing a lot to provide advice and support to them, and I work really closely with the Watford Chamber of Commerce on all of that as well. So I think it's a really good point and something that it would be a priority for me as well.
Thank you very much, Peter. Asif?
I've been in education now. I've been in further education for 22 years now. And that's my professional life. That is my vocation other than politics. So, most of us as politicians, we've got other roles in there. So I must have taught tens of thousands of students, primarily from ethnic minority backgrounds. I've worked in colleges in the city, in Tottenham, in Enfield. I've worked in St Albans. I've worked in Luton. I've worked in other outer London as well during my particular time. I've now taken senior management roles for the past 8 or 9 years. And one of the key things that which I'm passionate about is the educational inequalities that exist, and everything that I can do, whether it's writing policy documents, sending it up to the Department of Education, whether it's from an operational perspective, promoting courses which lead to careers, either to university or to apprenticeships that are actually viable and give them a career specifically in science, technology, in engineering and maths, STEM. That's my background. I push those, especially amongst Black and Afro-Caribbean students. I've mentored many. I have seen the expulsion, or sat on expulsion panels and overturned exclusions, which I thought were inappropriate. So there's many things that I do, and from my experience in the professional world, also will bring into policy, and I do that at the county council as well. And when it comes to policies, the impact that it has, the detrimental impact that it has on achievement, on success, it's so important for me that everybody has that chance to succeed and flourish. And as mayor, I would put in policies in place that allows every student, everyone to flourish and achieve their best. And any discrimination, anything barriers, I'll be the mayor to bust them and destroy them out of the way. That's the leadership I'll be offering.
Thank you, Asif. Did you say you needed to have a break between 8 and?
Yeah, I've got my. Sorry, I am fasting up, and it is at 8:07. So
okay, so let's have one more question then. Marilyn, what's the next? That's not Marigold, is it?
No, the next question, let me just go. Right, so this was a private question, so I won't say who it came from, but they were saying the council accepted a motion on Islamophobia a couple of years ago. If appointed mayor, will you be willing to support a similar motion on Afrophobia? They say they asked because of the increase in hate crime, discrimination in schools, the high number of Black children being excluded from school, and of course, local healthcare inequalities. So while these are not necessarily under the control of the mayor, are you able to set the standard for the town?
Okay, that's Peter. That's you to start off with this one.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to look at that. I mean, we have had a number of motions, so anti-Semitism, on Islamophobia, and on racism and discrimination, and on sexism. So I think that the question finished off by saying it's important to set the standard, and I think that's exactly right, that actually it's important as a civic leader and as the council, I know people look to us to set that standard. So I would be, happy to look at that. It's not something that's been suggested to me previously, but as I say, racism and all kinds of discrimination don't have a place in our town or our country. So that'll be something I'll be happy to look at.
Thank you very much, Peter. Asif, that's over to you for that one.
Yes, yeah, I've got no issue whatsoever with promoting policies as mayor that will prevent any type of racism. And if it's specifically with the African and Caribbean communities, I've got no problem whatsoever in promoting that particular policy.
Thank you. Benita?
Well, if I would be elected, as typical in these roles, directly elected mayors across the whole of the UK are white men. So it would be a privilege as a non-white woman to be able to show a leadership role when it comes to these issues. I've talked about how important this is to me personally, but as I see the growing diversity of our town, I think it's of utmost importance to ensure that everyone feels that they have a place in our society here in Watford and are even more proud to live here and feel that it provides as warm a welcome as possible.
Thank you very much. I think we could get another question in, Marilyn. What's the next one?
Okay, so our next question, let me see, I'll do a bit of scrolling.
I can see one from Marigold that needs changing.
Right, okay, so Marigold is 3 away. So we've got Andrea, Juliet, then Marigold.
Okay, so can we pick up some people who haven't asked any questions as yet? Because
yeah, absolutely. So I can go to Marigold next if you would like.
Juliet asked a question. I know Andrea's asked a couple.
Okay, so let's go to it. So this is from Marigold. It says, thank you for all you have said about...
Sorry, let me ask that question because I don't want to circumvent this. The question is simply this. If elected mayor, what would you do to increase the availability of social stroke affordable housing to larger families? So I'm going to start with Asif with respect to that.
Yeah, this is, I tell you, this is a real issue that I live in. I've got 4 brothers and I come from a typical Asian family. There were 5 sons and mum and dad. We lived in a 3-bedroom council house. We shared bedrooms, we shared upstairs, downstairs, 1 bath running up and down. And this is in the 70s and 80s. there's virtually less and less council housing at the time. It does, the housing policy does not meet the needs of large families, and that is one of the key things that it's one of those difficult caseworks that I get as a counsellor when families come to me who live in 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms with many children, many families, and it's and sometimes joint families, and it's really difficult. I would, as mayor, as I said right at the beginning, ensure that there's social and affordable housing, and actually build council housing. In the old days, we used to call them council housing, which gets less and less. Build houses which are a good mix. Not everybody can live in a 2-bedroom flat or 1-bedroom flat. You need 3 and 4 bedroom houses that need to be built, which are with social rent. And we need to have that relationship, have that discussion, and push developers to build those as well, because it's such a need for a diverse town. Watford is the most diverse town in Hertfordshire, and it's probably once the results come off in terms of the makeup of the town, I'm sure it'll hit over 50% being BAME, Black and Asian minority ethnic. Families are larger and much more joint when it comes to those. I understand that. I'm from one of those families, so something which I'll bring in.
Thank you, Asif. I think I've got Benita next.
Well, I typically as well come from a huge Asian family who all live in Watford, but I know I'm conscious of Asif's iftar time. So what I'd like to say is that it's really important to me to ensure that we have family homes built in Watford, not just flats that have not enough space. And Peter, you're right to talk about earlier when the windowless flats, good God, I don't think a single person would want to live in that, let alone a family or a parent or a child. So it's really important to me to ensure that there are homes that people want to build their futures in, and that we can raise proud families that have everything that they need and can make use of the amazing facilities that Watford provides by living here in a sustainable way.
Peter.
Yeah, I agree. We need to build more council houses. My manifesto's got commitment to build more council houses, homes for social rent, where the council's got more direct control. We're doing that. So, for example, the next phase of the development near Watford's football ground is going to be, rows of terraced houses with gardens and parking spaces, which I think we need. And the local plan says 1/5 of our new properties should have at least 3 bedrooms, if not more. I think it's about, size matters, make sure that we have houses preferably with decent number of bedrooms is really important. I think one of the things that's often forgotten about in this debate is people in temporary accommodation. So when I became mayor, we had 232 families in temporary accommodation, hundreds of children. And quite a lot of councils, the way of dealing with that has been to move them far away from the southeast because it's cheaper. So you see, councils in London housing people in not very good accommodation, in Birmingham, Sheffield, wherever. We've actually halved the number of people in temporary accommodation in Watford and made sure that everyone is housed within Watford. And my manifesto gives that commitment. I think it's really important for those children in temporary accommodation that they can still go to their local school. And so, again, we're building good quality temporary accommodation so that those people that are experiencing that can have a good quality of life before they move into permanent residence.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think we do need to just give Asif, I think he says probably on a 5-minute break, and it also means that we can have a comfort break. Conscious that there's quite a lot of other questions that people have set out, and there's even 1 or 2 that people discuss with me that haven't even featured as yet. So we're going to have a 5-minute break. Is enough, Asif? Yeah, 5-minute break, please. Stretch your legs, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Thanks, Asif. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, you didn't take 5 minutes.
I had my dates and my Beano. I'm back.
All right. Okay. Well, that's not sure everybody's back as yet, sir, but we'll try and kick off because actually we are going to probably only be able to answer another 2 questions in order to leave time for you to sum up. Let me just have a look at these questions because I might have to see if I can sneak in one of my own.
Clive, it's that dreaded time of night when our shadows are coming on my face and I don't have the brightness that I need for you guys to see me, but I know people on this call can relate.
Yes. Okay. Marilyn, I saw a message that somebody said there's more than one Marilyn on the call. So I mean, Andrea on the call. So, so maybe we better go back to the Andrea question, just in case it's from a different.
It was me that wrote it, Clive. There is more than one of us, and she's asking as well.
Okay, so do you want to ask that question, or because we've got to be very succinct now, maybe only a 1 minute answer from each, so we can get a couple of questions in.
Are you asking Andrea if she wants to pose that question herself?
As she was speaking, but look, do you want to
Not
just
me. It's not me, it's the other one.
Okay, okay, can somebody ask a question?
Okay, so I will go back, let me go back to the, so one of the Andreas, whichever one, said, I'd like to ask the candidates, what are you doing now in capital letters to support the third sector? And can they list anything substantive they've done in the last 6 months to identify issues within communities and then supported them to make positive change? So really asking about a track record here.
I think Joe asked that before, didn't he, for me?
Okay, so what's the next question?
Next one is, let's go down because we've got some comments in here as well. So this is touching on the families' issues. This was the other Andrea. How can families on low income be supported with energy efficiency or solar powered roofing? Are there any initiatives around that or planned initiatives? Okay,
1 minute answer to that, please. Benita, to go first.
Sure, I know a lot of government kind of funding and encouragement of both energy efficiency, solar power, electric vehicles is being done, and I support a lot of it. I think if we can all make better choices to help save the environment, that's something I really support doing.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Yeah, there's lots that we're doing already. So home installation is really important, and there's hundreds of houses that have been insulated. But on solar panels, we've just actually passed a policy of doing mass bulk purchasing, because as we all know, if you do a bulk buy, you get a discount. So there is going to be, across Watford, led by the council, a bulk purchase of solar power panels, so then the residents and businesses can get those at a discounted rate. And I was recently on the roof of the new multi-storey car park at Watford General to see 3 absolutely enormous solar panels there. So it's all part of our work to be net carbon neutral by 2030.
Yeah, okay. Asif.
Fuel poverty is going to be a major issue in the upcoming weeks and months. You know, everyone's got the latest estimate, and I think some of us will need to be taking out mini mortgages to pay out your monthly gas and electricity bills. You know, it's affecting families. What I would do is ensure that homes are insulated continuously, fund those and get national government grants to do that as well. Secondly, I'll look into our planning policy to ensure that new developments have got solar panels within there. So it's about looking at policies as a council to do that. And it also fits in to my poverty charter, that when council's policies are in place, that the impact of fuel poverty is also seen, and to do that, to minimise that. That may include grants for low-income families to help with their poverty, fuel poverty.
Thanks for that. I'm going to ask a quick question that somebody's raised with me. And just a quick answer, please. Brief. The question is this. It's about your principles and your belief. Should a Prime Minister resign and why? I think that's Peter to start with.
Yes, I think he should resign because he lied to Parliament, and there used to be a thing kind of honourably, if you misled Parliament, you resigned. I've had numerous people in tears over COVID, and for a minister this one to compare it to a speeding fine, loads of us made sacrifices. I remember going to my auntie's funeral 18 months ago. I couldn't hug my mum that day because that was the rules and we stuck by it, and loads of people did similar things, and it really does hurt when you've got a Prime Minister who's not only broken the rules but kind of thinks that we should all just forgive him. And as Mr. Pont said, yeah, I do think he should resign.
Thank you very much. Asif, quick.
I'm not going to surprise everyone. He absolutely should resign. He's broke the rules and laws that everybody else followed. You know, it's something which a Prime Minister should be above that. Her Majesty the Queen is that example of leadership. You know, you saw her during the funeral of her beloved husband. Compare that to what the Prime Minister did. You know, it's chalk and cheese, and he really should resign.
Thank you. Benita, a quick response?
Sure. As someone who is as disappointed, appalled, frustrated, disgusted with the rule breaking that went on, it's something that I've also had a lot of people that express this to me, and I share that regret. And it's not something that I support, and I would never defend, and it's not a way that I would work as Mayor of Watford. But this is a decision that will be taken by Tory MPs, and I am not one, so I don't feel able to comment on that.
Okay, Marilyn, can we get a very quick question in? Is there another one?
There's a question that might be, I'll tell you what it is, and then the candidates can say whether or not they think they have time to squish an answering, but it was a three-part question originally. So the first one part was, what makes you the right candidate for the job? The second part, which is, what is your favourite song and why? And your third part is, what are your good, memorable moments in Watford? So there's quite a lot there, but it might be just a fun way if they maybe pick one of those to finish off and round off the evening.
Well, I imagine they're going to finish off on the first point, because they're going to summarize. Which is the other question?
So one of them was, what's your favourite song and why? And a favourite memory of Watford.
Our favourite memory of Watford. Let's start with Asif.
There's many, and one of the favourite memories was me running. I live on Brixton Road, just opposite Albans Road. And as I was growing up, we used to have the Watford celebration just come down, almost Watford Carnival come down to Albans Road with the fates, and you know, it was a good celebration of diversity. I used to run outside and just watch it as it went past every year, and that was a really favourite memory, because you know, the streets were full, you could see it as you go past. And it's one, I can see one of the questions here about, you know, it's about celebrating.
Okay. Asif, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sorry.
I remember that myself, and it used to be going back 30 years or so.
Yeah.
Benita, what do you say?
Oh, my most memorable moment in Watford. I've lived my entire life in Watford, so it's going to be hard to choose one, but I suppose it's when my husband proposed to me, where we first met in Casbury Park, which was a very, very special moment. And if I can squeeze an answer to number two, music is my thing. So I have to also say, clearly I'm feeling romantic, but it's Casey and Jojo, All My Life, which is my song with me and my husband. So that's a very special song to me.
Okay, so
I'm sure lots of you all know it.
Is your husband all the way? Peter, you briefly?
Yeah, so my favourite memory, I was going to say the FA Cup semi-final. I remember going with my children, and that kind of sense of unity, and it looked like Watford were going to lose and then turned it around. We won't talk about the final, but my three children were all born at Watford General Hospital, so of course those are the most memorable days, welcoming them to the world.
Okay. Thank you very much. I noticed that somebody put in the chat something about encouraging people to to vote. And those of you who know me will not be surprised that I'm going to say to you that whatever your political view is, the one thing you shouldn't do is lose your vote. A lot of people have had to struggle to secure that in some places. People, they're making valiant attempt to try and deny people the vote. So we do have the vote. I know there's some questions around whether some of the mechanisms is trying to prevent particularly those from our communities from voting. But tonight, I'd want to say to you, make sure you and your family do make sure on the 5th of May, as in every election, you do go out and vote. It isn't the case that, but actually, maybe let's, as time is moving on, I better get on to the candidates doing a summarizing. So I said I was going to do this in reverse order to the original position. Clearly, this is where I'm asking the candidates to spend 2 minutes each. Marcia, you still there?
Yes,
Marcia?
I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Well, put your 2-minute timer on now. So 2 minutes each to just summarize the message that I want to leave with us this evening. And is essentially to answer that first question, why should people vote for you as the mayor? So I'm going to start in this case with you, Peter, because it's reverse order.
Thanks, Clive. I'm going to keep in Marcia's good books and definitely keep to my 2 minutes. Just to say it's been a huge pleasure to join you all this evening, and thanks for joining us and your contributions. I've loved being the mayor. It's been a huge honour to serve this town. Even those of you who might not agree with everything I say politically would hopefully recognise that I've been out and about in the community, accessible, and talking with you day in, day out. And I don't take that for granted. I think the role of the mayor is to bring people together to make positive differences. And that's always been my approach, working with people from all backgrounds, all faiths and all political persuasions. I want to be the mayor so I can get the improvements to Watford General, fight the unfair housing targets, and also cut congestion in our town. But Clive made a really important point about please do vote. We have, some fantastic councillors on this call this evening who've made a huge difference to Watford. I'm conscious that one person on this call lost by 10 votes last year. He would have been a brilliant councillor. And so please do make sure you turn out and vote, because quite often these results are really close. And the link that I shared has details of the local council candidates we've got. A fantastic, diverse and talented group of people standing for the Lib Dems in these elections for the council as well as the mayor. So thanks again for your time, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Peter. And Benita, over to you.
Thank you, Clive, and everyone here tonight for attending, including Asif and Peter, of course, for their time and their healthy political debate, which is always important. And political engagement within our community across Watford is something I've been passionate about my whole life, pretty much. So please ensure you, your friends and neighbours make their voice heard by making the time to vote on 5th of May or on postal ballots before then. As I mentioned at the start, I'm truly honoured to be standing in this election as mayor of my hometown for Watford. And as someone with a positive vision for our town, rooted in what matters most for our community, it would be my pleasure to be the first non-white female mayor of our town, so I can represent you and make this a town where we can all flourish. I promise I'll always put people before politics, and I'll work with Hertfordshire County Council, the government and the MP to engage proactively for our town, because I understand your needs and concerns. I'll stick up for you, I'll stand with you, and I'll put you in the residents of Watford first. As a lifelong resident of Watford, I'll do whatever it takes to secure the best deal for Watford and its people. I know how great this town is, but I'm convinced it can be better. So if you choose to put your trust in me and elect me, I'll ensure a change of direction, an ambitious fresh start for Watford that prevents us from becoming just another overdeveloped suburb of London, and instead improves local government for Watford to achieve more for our town, so it's a place that we can all flourish. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Benita. And Asif, to conclude.
Can I thank you for the invitation tonight, and thank you, Clive. I would be the mayor that would represent all of you. I'll be listening to you, what you've been saying. I will be using the experiences that I have. I want to build on that trust that's been given to me as a councillor and as a county councillor, to give that vision that this town needs. It needs more equality. It needs to be dealing with the issues that affects it, like poverty, like dealing with the housing crisis that we've got, dealing with the climate crisis. I will be the one who will provide that leadership that will bring communities together and destroy the barriers that prevent us from flourishing and achieving that particular equality. I need that by your support, and also by listening to you and listening to your views and achieving the very best for our town to make it even greater than what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asif. Marilyn, I noticed you were saying that there were some comments, and I did pick one up about encouraging people to vote. Are there some comments that we can share briefly before we close? Not really concerned about the ones that are directed at individuals, but are there any other comments?
Yeah, we've had lots of comments. I just want to thank everyone for those. They've been absolutely great. So just to give you a little flavour of what we've been talking about here, lots of thanks, lots of support for everything that's been done. Someone else is saying they would really, really appreciate if everyone can speak up to encourage young people to get out there and vote as well, which is definitely very important. A couple of people are saying they think the Arriva Click is great, so they do use that service. Another is saying that they see what's happening with promoting ethnic minorities, so they're very pleased about what's being done so far and really emphasize everyone getting involved. And also there should be an emphasis on encouraging ethnic minorities to understand local politics and putting emphasis on it's important that people get involved to make their needs met. And finally, people are just saying thank you very much for all of the councillors for being here, for sharing their views and for taking the time. So that's a flavour of what we've had in the comments. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. To try and conclude and sum up, I think this is not the first time we've done this, and what's been quite instructive is that we've not circulated the questions in advance, and we've still had plenty of questions from yourselves. And thank you all for joining in and making this a really meaningful process. There's been a variety of questions. There have been some challenging questions. And it kind of illustrates the fact that actually there's real value in us, I think, engaging the political process. Because we recorded this, of course, we do have a record of some of the points that our candidates have made. And one of the things that we'll want to do is to challenge them to come and talk to us about the reality of the next 4 years for whoever has been elected. The fact is that if you're African and Caribbean in this society, there's a whole range of measures, most of which we are in a disadvantageous position. And actually, we do need our political leaders to recognize that whilst we do kind of want to embrace a situation that is of value to everyone, the reality is that Black lives has not mattered as much as it should. And we do need to see that change moving forward from whoever is elected. And collectively, hopefully, we can be holding whoever is elected to account to not forget and to recognize the fact that we have a community here that is in need of fairness and equality at the end of the day. Dawn, did you want to make a quick point?
Yeah, I just want to make a point. As everyone knows, I'm a local councillor and I'm a Lib Dem councillor, but I just want to say, since Peter has taken over, you can see that there is a change.
Sorry, Dawn, I mean, this is not the place for that.
It is the place, Clive, because we are talking about, Clive, it is the place because we're talking about encourage ethnic majority to involve in politics. Thank you.
I mean, I think every candidate here will be seeking to encourage people to engage in politics. So to conclude, I'd like to, one, thank each of the candidates for their participation, their contribution, and their candid responses to the questions that have been asked. Wish you all well. And to conclude, as I said a while ago, we all need to make sure that we exercise our right to vote and vote on the 5th of May to ensure that we have a mayor that hopefully we can be proud of over the next 4 years. So thank you all again, and have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you, Clive, and thank you, everyone. Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye now. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for the great questions. And Clive, remember to shut off the recording.
Yes, yes, thank you.